Well, good morning, folks. My name is Brad Spangler, as you already know. The title of my talk is Positive Law and Progressive Values in a Stateless Society. And what I'm going to talk to you about is, well, a variety of things, but for the most part, it's going to be sort of how do we basically work on recruiting the people that we need to recruit to become enough of a mass movement to enable us to do the things that we want to do in terms of revolutionary theory. And where I'm going with that is, just by a show of hands, how many people consider themselves either agorists or understand agorism and have some affinity to it anyway? Okay, so this is basically an agorist gathering. So I take it that most of you understand that a lot of what we're doing is trying to create a set of alternative social institutions that is capable of supplanting the state or displacing it. We're anarchists in the sense that, we're against people forcibly ruling each other, but not necessarily against rules and organizations. That's a common myth, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's been frustrated with it. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's frustrating, right? Okay. So, in one sense, it can be looked at as strictly an economic struggle of the black market attempting to displace the white market of the state-approved and cartelized industries that are politically connected and dominated by big business and corporations. But also, in another sense, it's more of a broader social struggle, because what we're trying to do is actually jumpstart a new alternative legal system. And so I'm going to be talking about how we go about building that alternative legal system, how, by looking at how we know in theory it should function after the demise of the state, we can start building the foundation of it before the fall of the state. And by calling attention to the aspects of it that would be progressive and appeal most to people with progressive values, we can actually build the recruitment of people that would switch their allegiance to that alternative legal system faster and achieve freedom faster by bringing more people into our counter economy, our alternative or underground economy. So a lot of this will sound like politics, and it is politics in the meta-political sense, or some people might call it anti-politics. We're actually working on building a body of rhetoric or ways of talking to people about freedom so that they can develop the confidence and ability to be advocates for a free society and actually commit to living their own life free, number one, and also persuading others to live as free a life as they can, so that when that builds into a critical mass, the whole statist system just fades away. What do I mean by positive law? Well, it's a term that has a history of negative connotations for libertarians because we live under a statist legal system. Positive law is often contrasted with the concept of negative rights. Okay, for example, I do not have a right, as some statists might maintain, I do not have a right to make you, Mr. Bebo, provide me with housing, or you, Mr. Jetson, provide me with health care. I do not have these rights in any properly understood conception of rights. Rights are negative things. It's just another way of describing aspects of your own self-sovereignty that's rightful and yours by your inherent nature as a human being. You have a right to be left alone. Okay? Self-ownership, in other words. But people have, in their desire to try to build a better world and not realizing that you need to reject the state as a method of doing so, people have attempted to construct this idea of all these different sorts of bits of what can be called positive law, of a role for the state in shaping how we're supposed to behave and how we're supposed to treat each other. That really has nothing to do with liberty so much as social experimentation or trying to achieve a certain particular social vision. Some people, for instance, think that, well, for example, a civilized society doesn't mistreat animals, doesn't have a widespread animal cruelty. So, they have these laws on hand, for example, that say, you're going to be punished in this particular way if you do something awful or barbaric to that poor little puppy dog over there. And, it's real hard to argue with that for the average person, because unless you have a strong philosophical basis to stand up against it in terms of, okay, this is statist, and it's wrong to do this, even though it's not good to mistreat puppy dogs, it's even worse to try to achieve this good goal via an evil method, namely the state. So, positive law is not something that we as libertarians have a history of getting behind, by and large. But that doesn't have to be the case if we're talking about an entirely different legal system. And as we shift over from being people that are concentrating less and less on legal reform within the existing system and less on limiting government within the existing system, and actually start focusing more and more on building awareness of the desirability of a stateless society, then we can start talking about what that alternative society would look like and how it could achieve social norms that aren't necessarily described by liberty, but how those social norms can be achieved through libertarian means. So perhaps you wouldn't be offended if, in the absence of a state, we start achieving law for ourselves by making a set of pledges of what we shall not do to each other, just for purposes of mutual association. So, for example, if I'm going to hire someone or be hired by someone as part of the process of joining that company, for example, I might be asked to sign a pledge that I will not steal, embezzle, or vandalize the equipment of the company, yada, yada, yada. And if I am suspected of doing so, then I might be held liable for damages, and the case would go to arbitration with the XYZ legal company. And if I didn't like the reputation of the XYZ legal company, then I might not accept that job offer first. And if we agreed not to steal from each other, and then also agreed to submit any accusations of stealing by each other to arbitration, and that is already contracted ahead of time, then if someone then does not submit to arbitration as they had previously pledged to do and abide by the ruling of the arbitrator, then at that point in time that person has put themselves into an outlaw status by refusing to uphold the contract that they explicitly signed. So at that point in time, then all bets are off, and while force couldn't necessarily be used under the current state system, there would be no possible moral objection to it in the absence of the state. Because we can actually contractually delineate legal procedures for the things that are proper protections of our negative liberties, our actual libertarian law codes, we can actually create what could be thought of anyway as positive law in terms of obligations that may embody social norms that we view desirable amongst ourselves as an association or group or series of associations. For instance, I don't want to hang out with people that are abusing animals, for example. Or, you might not want to do business with people that don't recognize it as a standard that you don't use child labor, for example. Or any number of other things, any number of other sentiments that are generally put under the umbrella term progressive values in terms of what is a civilized, forward-looking society going to want to achieve in terms of its goals. All of these things can be protected contractually within a voluntary association. And where someone will not assent to them, then that is something that can be made known amongst their peers. And so social pressure can be brought to fore, not necessarily to coerce them to agree to them, but to persuade them to agree to them. And if they choose to forego the benefits of association by people that might expect them to agree to that standard of behavior, then that would certainly be their right. But then at the same time, it's their choice to lose the benefits of voluntary association with person A, B, C, and D. What I'm trying to explain here is that a large part of law in a stateless society is going to be contractual or associational. And what I'm saying is that we actually have an opportunity to actually build more of a body of libertarian rhetoric, or even left-libertarian rhetoric, that appeals to those progressive values. And I'm less trying to lecture you about them so much as deliver an invitation to you to contribute to building that body of rhetoric, that set of stock answers of how do we approach these questions, how do we approach answering them in such a way that people develop more of a comfort with the idea of building this alternative legal system. And that's important to us because we're not going to achieve a stateless society unless we can first start building the foundations of it before the fall of the state. We have to start trying to build these stateless legal networks, and it happens naturally in terms of the rudimentary stuff. I mean, people do not want to hang out with or do business with people that they actively dislike. But we can make it more explicit in terms of contract, and that's going to be the challenge before us anyway when trying to set up the underground legal networks to do business amongst ourselves and build a counter economy.